Hi, it's Karolyn. I'm here to help you learn how to bake and decorate amazing cakes. And in this video, I'm showing you my entire process of how I bake, fill, and ice a cake. I've had quite a few people ask me to do the entire process in one video so you don't have to keep referencing a bunch of different videos. Now, I do have videos showing you how to do each step of the process, and it goes into a lot of detail, so I will link all of those videos below. So let's get started. Whenever I bake, I always reference my cake batter saver chart. I like to divide my recipe into thirds so I don't waste cake batter. So I have to make a 7-inch cake, which requires one full batch of the batter, and then I have to make a 5-inch cake, which requires 2/3 of the batch. So I have to make 1 2/3 batches total. I will link this cake batter saver chart in the description for you. So I need 1 2/3, and then I also need 725 grams of the cake mix. So now I have my pan grease here. I have a video showing you how I make that. I will link that below, and I'm getting a light coating on the bottom and the sides of the cake pans, and also on these heating core nails. So I get a little bit of this pan grease on the bottom of the nail, and these heating core nails are going to heat the cake and bake the cake from the center while the cake pan bakes it from the edges. That way it's going to bake more evenly. I need 1 2/3 of the recipe. So I have my granulated sugar here. I'm getting 1 cup and then 2/3 cup of granulated sugar. And then with my flour, I like to mix it a little bit to get a little bit of air in this flour before I scoop it out so it's not firmly packed. This is all-purpose flour. And again, I'm getting 1 full cup and then 2/3 cup of this all-purpose flour. And now I am getting 2 boxes of this cake mix. I'm using chocolate fudge cake mix, and remember I needed 725 grams, so I have that scale. I will link that below. I set it to 0 and it's set to grams, and I pour 725. It went to 726. It's fine, there's an extra gram, whatever. I didn't feel like spending the time to get it exact. And then I'm putting this on low. This is on stir. I'm going to speed up the video so it's going to look like the beater is going faster, but it's not. Then I have 1 2/3 cup of whole milk, and I'm pouring that in there. And see, I'm slowing this down again so you can see how slow that beater is moving. And I'm mixing that just until it's incorporated, and then I want to turn that off, and I am adding 1 2/3 cup of full fat sour cream. You can substitute with full fat Greek yogurt if you prefer. And again, I'm putting that on low just until it's incorporated. Now I have 5 eggs, and then I like to add an extra egg yolk per 3 eggs that I use. So there's 5 eggs and 1 egg yolk, and I like to add them one at a time, and I lift my tilt head to help it incorporate a little easier. You want the eggs to be room temperature, and you don't want to just add them all at once. You want to do it one at a time so they can be evenly distributed within the batter. And then once that's all done, I like to take my spatula and scrape the sides and the bottom of the bowl. It's not necessary if you use a scraper blade. I personally don't like scraper blades, so I just prefer to do it myself. Now I want to put this on about a 5 out of 10 and let this mix for about 90 seconds to 2 minutes. When you are using a doctored cake mix recipe, you need to beat air into the batter after all of the ingredients are added. If you are baking from scratch, you want to beat the butter and the sugar together and then not mix it as much once all the other ingredients are added. So doctored cake mix baking is a lot different than scratch baking. So I had this mixing for about, it was like 1 minute and 45 seconds. And then once that's finished, I'm going to lift this up, and look how beautiful this batter looks. So I go over to my pans, and I'm just scraping the sides and the bottom one more time. I'm filling these 2/3 of the way full. I bake in 2-inch high pans. I like the cake to bake a little bit over the top of the pan so it bakes a little taller. Now I preheat my oven to 350 degrees, and I have 2 cookie sheets on that bottom rack. And what I did, I put 1 cup of water in each of those cookie sheets. So there's 2 cups of water total. And this is going to steam the cakes as they bake, and it's going to help really keep them moist. I do have a video where I go into detail on how I do that, and I'm going to link that below. So I just poured that water in those pans, and then I closed the door and I preheated it to 350 degrees. As I was preparing the cake batter. Now, I don't like to use my convection fan when I'm making doctored cake mix recipes, so I'm leaving the fan off. And then once it's preheated, I'm going to add the cake pans to the oven, making sure that they are not touching so air can circulate around all of them. And I'm going to check it after about 38 minutes, and then it still looks like it needs a little bit more time. I'm not adding any more water to those bottom pans. And I keep checking on these about every 5 minutes or so, and I remove them once I stick my cake tester in there and it comes out clean. So I'm going to set those aside for about 5 minutes to cool. And then I'm adding 1 cup of water again in each of these cookie sheets to prepare for the next batch of cakes that I have to put in there. Now, it looks like that fan was rotating. It only does as it's warming up the oven. Once I have the cakes in there, it won't rotate. But it does warp the cookie sheets a little bit as you pour that in there, but don't worry about it. Doesn't ruin them. Now I want to use this food safe plastic and lightly wrap these cakes. So I'm flipping them upside down, removing the nail and lightly wrapping it on here. Don't wrap it too tight because you don't want to distort the shape of the cake. And then I'm going to store them upside down in the freezer. I store them upside down because I level off the tops of the cake and I want to make sure the bottom of the cake doesn't get distorted as it is freezing. And I'm going to freeze them overnight. So they're in there for like 12 to 18 hours. And then in the morning, the next day that I fill them, I remove them from the freezer and store them upside down on cooling racks. I like to put them on a cooling rack because as it defrosts, a little bit of water drips out and I don't like the water to be on the table. I like it to drip through the cooling racks down onto the table. So I let this sit out for about 4 to 5 hours to completely thaw before I fill them. I don't like to fill or frost frozen cakes. Some people like to do it. I just prefer not to. Now I have this cake drum. I get them on Amazon. I will find them and link them below. I always write the customer's name on the bottom. That way I don't get the cakes confused. So I'm unwrapping these completely thawed cakes from the plastic. And since I overfill my pans and they bake a little higher, I like to take scissors and just trim the edges that are sticking over the top of the cake. Some people think it's crazy that I do it this way. This is just the way that I do it. I don't have 3-inch high pans, so this is what I do. And then I have this leveler here and I want to tort the cake. So I'm cutting these in half. So I'm going to get 4 thinner layers of cake out of these 2 7-inch cakes. And then I'm going to adjust the wire to a higher notch. That way I can level off the tops of the cakes. And then I can save those tops to make cake pops, or I can give them to my neighbors. My neighbors love me because I'm always giving them extra cake. And then this is just me being a little OCD, but I like to take my scissors and just trim over the edges. That way the sides are perfectly clean and straight and they're not going to be bulging out. This is just the process that I do. Some people may think it's weird, but this is just the way that I do it. Now I have some simple syrup. I have a video showing you how I make that. I will link it below. And I'm just spraying a couple sprays of the syrup on each layer. I don't need too much because I added the water to those trays in the oven, so they baked really moist, but it's just a little moisture security blanket. I got a little bit of icing on that cake drum and put that bottom layer down, and now I'm filling it with some cookies and cream filling, and I have a video showing you how I make this, and I will link that below. And I'm spreading it all the way past the edges of the cake. Now I don't like to pipe stiffen buttercream dams. Just because of the way that I fill and frost my cakes, I don't need to. However, if you prefer, you can pipe a stiff buttercream dam around the edges, the outer edge of the cake. That way it'll help prevent the cake from the icing from bulging out the sides. I just prefer to do it this way. Then I got some simple syrup on both sides of that next layer, and I'm spreading another layer of that filling on. And then again, I sprayed that layer lightly with the simple syrup, and I'm just filling this cake and then putting on the top layer. Then I like to take my spatula and just scrape off the excess filling. So I'm trying to remove as much as I can while kind of sealing all of those layers together. And I'm just scraping off as much of the excess icing as possible. So this is just giving a nice clean finish to the cake. And then I'm taking that plastic that those individual layers were wrapped in, and I'm wrapping this cake up, and I'm making sure that it comes all the way down to the bottom of the board so it is completely covered and no cake is exposed. And I just wrap it twice to give it a little extra protection as it sits to settle. Now, if you need to speed up the settling process, if you have a perishable filling, you can put a cardboard circle on top of the cake and then a lightweight plate on there. You want to make sure that it is center. It can't be off to one side or the other, or else it's going to settle unevenly. This will speed up the settling process so you can crumb coat and fill your cake. You want to give your cake time to settle because the layers are going to naturally settle down, which is going to push that filling out the sides. So you need to give your cake time to settle. So I usually let my cake settle at room temperature overnight. But again, if it's a perishable filling, you need to speed up the settling process and do it within like 2 or 3 hours. I'm removing the plastic wrap. And then what I like to do is just take my spatula and scrape off any of the excess icing that bulged out through the sides through the settling process. And I want to add the crumb coat. So I have a big batch of American buttercream icing, and I have a video showing you how I make that, and I will link that below. And I'm just crumb coating this cake, so it doesn't have to be perfect. But what I'm doing, I'm working in small sections here, and I'm really pressing that icing against the side of the cake to make sure that no air bubbles are forming behind it. If you just slap icing on the side of the cake and you are not careful, you could get an air bubble and icing blowout, which is a big bubble that forms underneath your icing, and it's a nightmare. Trust me, it's happened to me so many times, and I found that this process really helps prevent it from happening. So once I spread it around the bottom half of the cake, I like to spread it around the top half. And the top section needs to have icing coming out over the top of the cake so I can level it off. And then I spread a thin layer of icing around the top of the cake as well. And then I want to dip my bench scraper in this hot water, and I'm heating up that metal piece. And you just want to heat the metal. And then I'm going to wipe that in a paper towel to remove all the excess water. So I'm just using that hot blade, and then I'm holding it perfectly vertical, and I'm just unwinding that turntable once and scraping off that excess icing. And again, it's a crumb coat. It doesn't have to be perfect. Then I'm holding my spatula perfectly horizontal, and I'm just pushing that excess icing back to create an even top edge. And again, I said it doesn't have to be perfect. It's a crumb coat. We'll make it perfect during the next process. And I want to put that back in the refrigerator for about 4 hours so the icing can really solidify before I add this next batch of icing. Now I have some purple American buttercream here, and I'm going to do the same process. So I'm grabbing a little bit and I'm spreading it around the bottom half of the cake. Now you want this icing to be about 1/4 of an inch to a 1/2 inch thick. So you need to be mindful as you're spreading this around the cake to make sure that it isn't too thick and it's pretty even thickness around the entire thing. And again, I'm really pressing it against the cake to make sure that no air bubbles are forming behind it. And once I have the bottom section done, I'm going to do the same thing and work on the top half, making sure that the icing comes over the top half of the cake. And then don't forget to fill in the very top of the cake as well. It's about 1/4 to a 1/2 inch thick of icing that I'm doing. And then I'm going to dip my bench scraper in this hot water again. I'm trying to heat this blade to make the metal really hot so it can smooth out the icing. And after I dip it in there, again, I want to wipe it on the paper towel to make sure there's no water on there. I'm holding it perfectly vertical, and I like to only go over this once or twice. Do you see how I'm bringing my one hand all the way over to the right side of the cake board, and then I'm unwinding it once? That way I'm just doing like one fell swoop to remove some of this icing and to smooth it out. If you do a lot of short little sections, you're going to put a lot of little marks in the buttercream. So once I do that, I remove the icing, I dip that bench scraper back into that hot pot of water, take my paper towel and wipe it off, and I'm just going to do this one more time. So I'm holding that perfectly vertical, and I'm unwinding that turntable so I can smooth this out. And that looks pretty good. Now we need to remove these imperfections that bench scraper made. So I'm using this Viva Signature Cloth paper towel. You can only do this on a crusting buttercream. If you're using a meringue buttercream, this process will not work because it does not crust. So I'm just using my fingers and running it up and down that paper towel to remove any of the marks that the bench scraper made. And it did stick to the paper towel a little bit. If you find that it is sticking to the paper towel, either your bench scraper was a little too wet or it was too hot and it heated up the icing a little too much. So just be patient with it. You can let it sit for a couple minutes so it can crust. But do you see how I'm carefully pulling the paper towel down so I'm not peeling any icing off? And then I like to use my fondant smoother, and what I'm doing, I'm really pressing that against that paper towel to try to make sure that the edges of the cake are perfectly vertical. And now I need to level off the top of the cake. So I dip my spatula in the hot water, wipe it off on that paper towel so it's just that hot blade. And I'm scraping this off so I can get a really nice sharp edge at the top. So again, I'm aligning the back half of that with the line I just made and using the front half of the spatula to remove the excess icing. Then I'm dipping that back into the hot water to warm up that blade and wiping it off with the paper towel and repeating the process until I go all the way around the cake. And then I'm just using my paper towel and my fondant smoother just to refine this one more time. I'm really pressing that icing against the cake, trying to make sure that it is perfectly vertical. And then I want to stick this in the refrigerator for about 5 minutes so it can lose its stickiness before I continue this process. So I removed it from the fridge, and now I want to smooth this out using my butcher paper, and I will link this in the description for you. But the butcher paper is going to remove any of the marks that the Viva towel made into the icing when I was smoothing it with the towel. And again, I have a video where I go into complete detail on how I ice a smooth buttercream cake, and I will link that in the description. And now I just want to refine this top edge one more time, so I'm dipping my spatula in that hot water, holding it perfectly horizontal and just scraping off that icing, trying to refine that top edge so I can get it really sharp and perfectly level. So I'm sitting eye level with the cake and just making sure that this looks as sharp and clean as possible. And then I just want to refine it one more time using my fondant smoother and the butcher paper. And now I want to smooth out the very top of the cake, so I'm just getting a little bit of that hot water on that spatula, putting it on the top, and you need to spread it out right away. If you let it sit too long, it's going to discolor the icing. So I'm just being careful, making sure I'm not going to push that water over the edges because I don't want it to drip down the sides of the cake. And I pop that little air bubble there. And any excess water, I'm just like shaking that spatula in my sink so I can remove it. And then I start from the outer edges and push the water in. This way I'm not going to distort the symmetry in the cake. And here is my cake. Now, I hate that this Wilton food coloring sometimes leaves streaks in my icing. It drives me crazy. And I have some little pock marks here. If you need to fix that, what you can do is put this back in the refrigerator overnight, and then the next day take some of that same icing and just patch those holes. But I don't need to do that because here is the cake. And what I did, I added edible images to this cake. This is for the pole studio that I teach yoga at. That's me on that bottom picture there. I used to be a pole fitness teacher. But you can see all of these edible images on here really cover any of those imperfections that were in the bottom tier. So I didn't have to fix it. But if this was exposed, I would have wanted to patch any of those imperfections once I took it out of the refrigerator. So there you go. I hope this helped you guys out. Now, when I bake, fill, and ice my cakes, I usually do that over the course of about 3 days. And I typically, especially during a busy week, I will bake my cakes on a Friday for the following weekend, not for that same weekend. I will thaw and fill the cakes on a Saturday, and then I will crumb coat and ice the cakes on a Sunday, and then the cakes will be in the refrigerator from Sunday all the way through to the following weekend as I'm decorating the cakes. Now, a lot of people will say, is the cake going to be fresh? And the cake will be fresh, I promise you. If you make your cakes correctly and you bake them and they are moist, they are not going to dry out in the refrigerator by sitting in there for a couple of days. The icing on the outside is going to help seal the cake, and it's going to stay moist. Now, if you like my recipes, you can download my ebooks that I have. I have my signature scratch pound cake recipes, all of my best doctored cake mix recipes, all of my buttercream icing and filling recipes, along with my favorite numbers and my favorite fonts. So they will all be linked below. And just a reminder, I have a KakeAcademy membership program where I can help you elevate your cakes to the next level. All that information is in the description. Please like this video if you liked it, and if you're enjoying my tutorials, I would be so grateful if you could buy me a coffee. My link is down below. And I would love it if you would keep in touch on socials, and you could check out my website. And if you want to stick around, you can watch this video next, and hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. So remember, it's cake, have fun. I will see you on the next one. Bye.